This happened a few years ago, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. I had just finished a long day at work, one of those days that seemed like it would never end. I was exhausted and just wanted to get home, so I decided to take a shortcut down this country road I wasn't all that familiar with. It was late, and a chill was setting in. The fog started rolling in around dusk, just a thin layer at first, but by the time I was halfway down that road, it was so thick I could barely see a few feet in front of the car. I was gripping the steering wheel, squinting to see through the windshield. My headlights were on, but they didn't seem to help much. The fog was just swallowing everything. I turned off the radio to concentrate. Something about the thick silence felt heavy, like the fog was pressing in on me. That's when I saw it. Up ahead, just barely visible through the fog, was a figure standing by the side of the road. At first, I thought maybe it was a trick of the light or my tired eyes playing games on me. But as I got closer, I realized it was a child. A little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, just standing there in a thin dress, completely out of place in the middle of nowhere on a night like this. I slowed the car down, almost to a stop. She just stood there, staring at me. She didn't move, didn't wave, nothing. Just stared. Her face was pale and I could see her hair was damp, probably from the fog. My heart was pounding, but I rolled down the window a little and called out, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" No response. She just kept looking at me with these wide, dark eyes. I felt uneasy. I mean, who wouldn't? It was late, cold, foggy, and here was this kid just standing there alone. I hesitated for a second, then decided I couldn't just leave her out there. I put the car in park, grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment, and got out. As soon as my foot hit the ground, she turned and bolted. I mean, she ran fast, straight into the thickest part of the fog. I panicked. I don't know why, but I did. I just felt like I couldn't let her disappear like that, so I ran after her, yelling, "Wait, stop!" The fog was so thick, I could barely see my own hand in front of me. I could hear her little footsteps up ahead, crunching on the gravel, but then they suddenly stopped. I found myself standing at the entrance to this old, narrow path leading into the woods. It was barely visible through the fog, but I could make out the shape of some trees and the ground. I saw her footprints in the mud, small and fresh, leading down the path. I should have gone back to the car right then. I knew it. Something in my gut told me this wasn't right, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to make sure she was okay. I started down the path, flashlight in hand, following the little footprints. The further I went, the thicker the fog got. It felt like it was closing in around me. I could barely see, and the only sound was my own footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. After a few minutes, the footprints suddenly stopped in a small clearing. I stopped too, looking around, shining my flashlight into the mist. No sign of her anywhere. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding small in the dense fog. "Are you there?" Nothing, just silence. Then I heard it, a faint giggle, somewhere off to my left. It was a soft, childlike giggle, but it sounded off, like it was echoing, bouncing around the trees. I felt a chill go down my spine. I turned toward the sound, my flashlight shaking slightly in my hand. "Hello?" I tried again, but this time my voice was weaker. The giggle came again, this time from behind me. I spun around, but all I saw was fog. My heart was racing. I felt like I was being watched, like there were eyes on me from somewhere in the mist. I backed up a step, nearly tripping over something on the ground. I shined my light down and saw a small, muddy shoe. It looked old, like it had been out here for a long time, covered in dirt and leaves. Then I heard another sound, closer this time, a whisper, like someone saying something I couldn't quite make out. I couldn't tell where it was coming from, but it felt like it was all around me. My stomach dropped. I decided I needed to get out of there. Now. I turned and started back the way I came, but the fog was thicker now and I couldn't see the path. I tried to retrace my steps, but everything looked the same. The fog seemed to twist and shift around me. I was getting scared, really scared. I just kept moving, trying to find the way back to the road, to my car. Finally, after what felt like forever, I saw the faint outline of my car through the fog. I almost cried with relief. I rushed over, fumbled with the door handle, and practically threw myself inside. I locked the doors and sat there for a moment, catching my breath. I looked back through the windshield, and that's when I saw her again. the little girl, standing at the edge of the road, just barely visible through the fog. She was staring at me, her face still pale, her dress still thin and fluttering slightly in the wind. I blinked, and she was gone. I didn't stick around to find out what was going on. I started the car, turned around, and drove out of there as fast as I could. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, my heart pounding the whole way back. I've taken that road a few times since, and every time I see the fog start to roll in, I feel that same chill, that same sense of unease. I don't know who that girl was or what happened to her, but I'll never forget the look in her eyes or the way she just disappeared. I live in a small seaside town, the kind of place that's usually quiet at night, except for the sound of the waves hitting the rocks. The ocean's always been a comfort to me, its rhythm like a lullaby that lulls me to sleep. But that night was different. The fog rolled in thicker than I'd ever seen, a heavy blanket that seemed to swallow the whole town. Even the streetlights looked like dim, flickering candles through the mist. It was past midnight, and I was getting ready for bed. I'd had a long day at work, and all I wanted was to close my eyes and drift off. But just as I was about to turn off the bedside lamp, I heard it, a low, murmur-like sound coming from outside. At first I thought it was the wind playing tricks on me. Maybe it was just the foghorn from the lighthouse, I told myself. But the sound didn't stop. It kept going, a sort of rhythmic chant, like someone whispering just out of earshot. I froze, listening intently. It was faint, but definitely there. A voice, mumbling something I couldn't quite make out. I tried to ignore it, pulling the covers up to my chin, but the sound seemed to grow louder, clearer. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't the sea. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, straining to catch the words, but they were too distorted, too jumbled. It was like whoever or whatever was speaking was trying to say something important, something I was supposed to hear. Curiosity got the better of me. I got out of bed and walked over to the window. The fog outside was thick, swirling slowly in the glow of the porch light. I leaned in closer, pressing my ear against the cold glass, trying to make sense of the sound. It was coming from somewhere in the fog, low and raspy, like someone reciting an incantation or a prayer. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It was close, too close. I couldn't see a thing outside. The fog was like a living thing, moving in slow, deliberate waves. I took a deep breath, opened the window just a crack, and the voice became clearer. I could hear words now, though they made no sense. It was in a language I didn't understand, a strange mixture of soft murmurs and harsh consonants. But what chilled me the most was the tone. It was cold, emotionless, almost like a monotone chant. I suddenly felt a shiver run down my spine, my breath fogging up the window. I wanted to slam it shut, lock it, and run back to bed. But something about that voice held me in place. It was hypnotic, almost beckoning. I leaned out a bit further, trying to see where it was coming from. The fog was so thick I could barely see the porch light anymore. And then, as suddenly as it started, the voice stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. I held my breath, straining to hear anything, any sound that might tell me I hadn't imagined it. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I waited, every nerve on edge, but there was nothing. Just the fog, pressing in closer against the window. I slowly closed the window, my hand shaking a little. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was just someone down by the beach, talking to themselves. Maybe it was some late-night drunk wandering through town. I turned away from the window, deciding it was best to just get some sleep. But as I took a step back toward the bed, I felt a cold draft on the back of my neck. I turned around slowly, my eyes widening. The window was open again, just a crack, though I was sure I had closed it tight. I felt a sudden rush of panic. I rushed back to the window and slammed it shut, making sure to lock it this time. My hands were shaking badly, and I could feel my heart racing in my chest. I stood there for a moment, staring at the lock, trying to calm down. It was probably nothing, just my imagination. The fog can play tricks on you, they say. I backed away from the window, keeping my eyes on it, and crawled back into bed. I pulled the covers up over my head like a child trying to hide from a monster. The room was silent, except for the sound of my own breathing. But then I felt it, a weight on the edge of the bed, like someone had just sat down. The mattress dipped slightly, and I felt a shift, like something was moving closer. My heart was in my throat. I didn't dare move. I stayed perfectly still, listening to the fog outside, praying that whatever was in my room would just go away. And then I heard it again, right next to my ear, the same low, rhythmic voice. This time the words were clearer, like they were being whispered directly into my ear. I felt a cold breath on my skin, and I bolted upright, looking around the room. Nothing. The room was empty. The fog outside seemed to press harder against the windows, and I realized something. I could see it. It wasn't just outside, it was seeping in, curling under the window frame like tendrils reaching into the room. I jumped out of bed and backed up against the wall, my eyes wide with fear. The voice was still there, soft and insistent, coming from the fog that was now creeping across the floor, snaking toward me like some living thing. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it at the fog. The light cut through the mist, and for a second I thought I saw a face, pale, with wide, staring eyes. And then it was gone, swallowed by the fog. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I ran out of the room, down the stairs, and out of the house, not stopping until I was standing in the middle of the street. The fog was still thick, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away from that voice, that presence. I don't know what it was, or why it chose my house that night. I spent the rest of the night in my car, with the doors locked, watching the fog roll in and out, listening for that voice. It never came back, but I still hear it sometimes, late at night, when the fog is thick and the world is quiet. And every time, I feel that same cold breath on the back of my neck, like a reminder that it's still out there, waiting. This happened a while back, but I still think about it whenever it gets foggy out. It was one of those days where the fog was so thick you couldn't see more than a few feet in front of you. I'd had a rough day and decided to go for a walk to clear my head. There's this little wooded path near my house, and I thought, why not? The fog actually made it kind of peaceful, you know? So, I put on my headphones, started up some random podcast, and headed out. At first, it was just me, the sound of my footsteps and the muffled voices in my ears. I wasn't really thinking about anything, just kind of zoning out. But after a few minutes, I got this weird feeling, like that prickly sensation you get when you know someone's watching you. I pulled out one of my earbuds and listened. At first, there was nothing but my own breathing and the soft rustle of the leaves. Then I heard it, soft footsteps behind me. I stopped, turned around, but there was nothing, just fog. I shrugged it off, maybe a rabbit or something in the bushes, and kept walking. But now I was on edge, you know? I kept looking over my shoulder every few steps. A little while later I heard it again, clearer this time, definitely footsteps, and they were matching my pace. I stopped again, and so did they. Dead quiet. I waited, staring into the fog, trying to see something, anything, but it was just a wall of gray. I felt my heart start to race a bit. I told myself I was just being paranoid, so I kept going. But the sound didn't go away. Every time I sped up, the footsteps would speed up too. When I slowed down, they slowed down. I even tried stopping suddenly to catch whoever or whatever was out there off guard, but every time I did, there was just silence. I started to freak out a little. I mean, it's the middle of the day, I'm on a public path, and it's not like I'm in the middle of nowhere. But this fog, it was like it swallowed everything. I couldn't see the path ahead, couldn't see where I'd come from. It was just me and that sound. I decided to turn back. Whatever, I'd had enough fresh air for one day. I turned around and started walking back the way I came, but now the footsteps were behind me again, still following. They were getting closer, like whoever it was had started to catch up. I felt a knot in my stomach. I thought about calling out, but what if I was wrong? What if it was just an echo or something? I didn't want to feel like an idiot yelling into the fog. So I just kept walking, faster now. I wasn't running, but I was pretty close to it. The footsteps kept up with me, getting louder, closer. I could almost feel them right behind me. My heart was pounding, and my breath was getting shaky. I knew I was panicking, but I couldn't help it. Finally, I got to this little clearing, and for a second, I felt some relief because the fog wasn't as thick there. I stopped, turned around again, and nothing. No one was there, just fog, trees, and that eerie, quiet stillness. I stood there trying to calm down, telling myself I was being stupid. Then I heard this low, soft laugh, like someone chuckling just under their breath. It sent a shiver right down my spine. I couldn't tell where it was coming from, maybe behind me, maybe to the side. I wasn't sticking around to find out. I bolted, sprinting down the path as fast as I could. I could still hear the footsteps behind me, matching my speed. I didn't dare look back this time. I just ran, focusing on my breathing, trying not to trip over anything in the fog. I kept thinking, just get to the end of the path, just get home. After what felt like forever, I finally saw the edge of the woods and my street up ahead. I burst out of the trees, panting and sweating, and kept running until I reached my front door. I slammed it shut, locked it, and stood there, just trying to catch my breath. I peeked out the window, but the fog was so thick I couldn't see much. I waited, watching, but nothing happened. No footsteps, no laugh, no shadowy figure emerging from the mist. I stayed like that for a while, just staring into the fog, expecting, I don't know, something. Eventually, I started to feel a little ridiculous, but I still couldn't shake that feeling that someone or something was out there, just beyond where I could see. Since then, I haven't walked that path alone when it's foggy. Every time I even think about it, I get this knot in my stomach. I keep telling myself it was just my imagination, just a trick of the fog, but I don't think I'll ever really know for sure. That's today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the notification bell. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.